Hey everyone, it's Jamison Cable of the Land Between the Meadows, Kentucky History Podcast. I just want to say thank you for your support and listening to this episode. For all the updates on our podcast and YouTube channel, youtube.com/Kentucky History Channel, like and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at KY History Pod. If you're enjoying the podcast, give us a good rating and review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast platform that you're listening to. If you're looking for ways to support the podcast, an easy and simple way is to share it on Facebook or any other social media and tell your friends. You can also go to audibletrial.com/KYHistoryPod and get a free book of your choice. And finally, you can visit patreon.com/KYHistoryPod if you want extra content from us. If you're already a patron, thank you for your support. It means so much to us. All the links I've mentioned are in the description of the podcast, so go check them out. Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode. And remember, if it's not about Kentucky, it ain't worth a hill of beans.
In the pines, where the sun never shines, you'll shiver when the cold wind blows. There's a grave in the pines, where the sun never shines. There's a grave that's shaded with the pine.
When we talk about education in Kentucky, Kentucky, I don't know exactly when to say that the first public schools in Kentucky began to get going. And my thought was, well, good, they got going, let's say, in 1849.
Yeah.
In that area. 1840, there was limited public education. It wasn't for everyone, but they did have some government-sponsored schools in different places.
Yeah.
When we look at a state like Massachusetts with the Puritans, which was education was part of their religion. I mean, if you had children, they had to be educated, and much of it was church education.
Yeah.
But they had public schools and insisted that everyone go in 1629.
Wow.
And if you didn't go, send your children to school, you'd be put in jail. Wow. They would imprison the mother and the father.
In 1600s?
1629.
Wow.
The Pilgrims. And Kentucky didn't get going until way after that.
Which it didn't get settled until a little bit.
It didn't get settled, that's right. You can argue that. But Kentucky politicians in the Kentucky legislature didn't want to spend money.
Yeah.
In their first constitution and their second constitution, Kentucky became a state in April the 1st, 1792. They didn't even mention education.
Yeah.
It wasn't even on their mind. And this is a tradition. Even today in many Kentucky rural counties, if they talk about raising taxes to improve education, they'll vote it down.
Oh, yeah.
Heck no, we don't want to get, put any more money in our schools. And as a state, it's touch and go, whether if you have a governor who's running to improve education, put more money in for teachers, to try to get better quality teachers and so forth. It's touch and go as a state, even today. When we talk about public school education in Kentucky, starting kind of late, when we have an idea that public school and education, we think of modern schools and so forth, but most of them were one-room schools and log cabins, and it was not distributed evenly.
No.
We've always had in our state the controlling politics of the imperial bluegrass farmer.
Yeah.
Overshadowed politics in the state.
Yeah.
And if we get into talks about slavery and so forth like that, we'll see how they dominated the state. But Kentucky schools, when we had our first public schools and, they said, let's have public schools, it was something like maybe 80% of the teachers didn't have more than a third or fourth grade education, and they taught on that level. There was no plumbing.
Yeah.
They either went out in the woods or an outhouse.
Yeah.
They only went to school 5 months out of the year. And when you had, say, 800,000 children in Kentucky, only about 200,000 of them went to school regularly. There was no truancy. They may have registered, but they never even attended.
Yeah.
It was really pitiful. In eastern Kentucky, and I don't mean to pick on eastern Kentucky, it was something like 75% of the superintendents in the public schools were illiterate. They couldn't read or write.
Wow.
And there was even a percentage of teachers that were illiterate.
That is a bit daunting.
It is a bit daunting. So you can imagine, my grandfather, Martin T. Pope, in Tennessee, very similar to Kentucky, taught in a one-room schoolhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And when he started, he was evidently fairly smart, smarter than,
Fourth grade?
I never did think he was very smart, but he was smarter than anyone else in his family, and the community wanted him to be the school teacher. And when he first started teaching, 2 of his brothers were older than him. He taught. He taught them in school. And there were about 30 kids of all ages.
Yeah.
And he said that every year when he went there, and Thomas Clark talks about this in his book, that there were bullies again.
Yeah.
You ain't going to teach me nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to beat you up if you try.
Yeah.
So my grandfather, who lived with me in his senior years, lived in our house, and we sat around the fireplace at night, and he told stories about school teaching, one-room school. He said he had to, his first year of teaching particularly, there were a group of boys that were tough.
Yeah.
So to be a school teacher, if you were a male, you had to be a fighter. If you couldn't fight, you couldn't teach.
Literally fighting.
And he went out, they said the first day they challenged him on the playground. They said, we ain't going to listen, we're going to whoop your butt. And he had a fight. He said it was knocked down and dragged out. And he said he knew his career. If he lost the fight, it was over.
Yeah.
And he said those boys, those big farm boys were tough.
Yeah.
And he said it was just a bare-knuckle fist fight. And it went on till, they knocked the other one out.
Yeah.
And he said he just barely won the fight. And all the school children gathered around in a circle.
Yeah.
And after that, he tamed them. He'd say, you either get that book out, boy, I'm going to whip your butt.
Oh, my goodness.
It's also interesting to know that Kentucky started these schools, but they had no money for textbooks.
Yeah.
And the schools didn't have any textbooks. And then they didn't even know what textbooks to buy.
Yeah.
But one interesting thing that I think about Kentucky history and textbooks and schools is that if you wanted to buy a textbook like a McGuffey Reader, you bought it at the country store. They sold everything. And textbooks were less than $1 a piece, and you had to buy your own textbook. And many of the families had 12 or 13 children, and they would buy one, reader, and everybody in the family would share it, would get passed down. No matter if they're all attending school, 10, 12 kids, they all used one book.
Wow.
And many of the poor people in Kentucky complained vehemently that was too much money to spend. And then when Kentucky started, their legislature started allotting money for textbooks. They were superintendents. And I can remember this when I first started teaching 34 years ago in rural Kentucky, that there would be book salesmen come by. It was a big deal. They may still come by. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure.
But they had a satchel, and they got commissions for selling books. And they would just, every school, in one county would have different books depending on what he could sell. And he would bring them out and lay them on the table. What do you think about this? And I can give you, 25 of these for $1.50 a piece. And it wasn't anything about, are they up to date? There were no visual aids. There were no globes. There were nothing. There were no maps. And the teachers probably couldn't even read the maps and hadn't even seen a map of their state or of their country or anything else. There were no visual aids. And we think about that with computers and how we've gone so far today that you can't even get kids hardly to open a book unless it's a, what do you call it, laptop? Is that what you all use? Chromebook. All at every school. I've substituted, and the lesson plans are get out the Chromebooks, for an hour or two. And it just changed so much. But there was really books. They bought inappropriate books with what little money they had. The public was not willing to be taxed to support schools. They didn't care about education. And it was only when Kentucky was next to Mississippi, 49th in the country, that they began to shame Kentucky politicians into doing something. So one of the things that the Kentucky legislature did that was huge, and we're here in the Lincoln County Public Library today, is they started the library system of books, in rural counties. Every county was to have a library. And that was huge because the fathers and mothers couldn't read. They were uneducated, but at least there was a source of books, and there was a spark of light.
Now, back to the fighting.
Yes.
Fighting your students on your first day. What time frame? I mean, when would this be? Early 1900s?
1930s.
1930s.
In 1900. 1900 to 1930. And many of the schools were log cabins.
Well, my grandma, she walked to her school. It was still standing probably about 5 to 10 years ago, Ottawa school. And it was a one-room school, and her whole family went there. They walked there in the snow, uphill both ways, of course.
Right.
But she started going to the city school, I think when she was maybe in like seventh grade, which would have been at Broadhead. Mm-hmm. I think. But yeah, I mean, that's she's older.
Most people say those walk to schools were really enlightening.
I'd say so.
I mean, some of them complained. Mm-hmm. When I lived in Lexington, my family, when I was going to the second grade and the first grade, my family would put me in a yellow raincoat and tell me to walk. And it was probably 8 or 9 blocks to school. Yeah. And I remember I walked through a park and through a woods to get there. And I remember in the spring there was riverlets of water, and I had to wade them with rubber boots on. Yeah. And I was late to school, but I loved it. And I walked by myself.
Yeah.
It was really something. Thomas Clark writes in his book, Kentucky Educational History cannot be presented in intelligible perspective without resort to at least some elementary statistics. In 1900, as noted, there were still in existence 1,238 log schoolhouses, and in 1908, there were 739,836 school-age children, of whom 519,000 were enrolled in school. So that's over 200,000 school children that were not educated. That's in 1900. But only 311,922 maintained even a semblance of daily attendance. Wow. So that's less than half of the school children of Kentucky even went on a regular basis, even showed up. Yeah. They would just register. So it was really Kentucky spent a little more than $3 million on its schools, including less than $1 million on its furnishings and equipment, and less than $30,000 on library materials. That's for the whole state. Yeah. There were 7,582 schools, 6,972 districts, and schoolhouses were valued at less than $1 million, or $132 per school. Wow. Was the total of the grounds and everything.
$132 per school.
Mm-hmm. And I remember reading a description of one that said that the schoolhouse was not a pleasant place. The grounds were bare, dirt. Mm-hmm. There were no trees surrounding the school. Yeah. There was no landscaping or anything. It was just a plot with a building, and it was just so depressing. Mm-hmm. You go there and get your beatings. You know? I mean, that's kind of the way it was. I ain't gonna teach you nothing. I'm gonna whip your butt, boy. Yeah. I'm gonna put the dud suit on you and put you in the corner. I mean, it was like spare the child. Beat the child into submission and ridicule them. Mm-hmm. We think about all these children today that have learning disabilities and how sensitive we are as teachers to make everyone succeed and all that. They're just like, I'm going to beat the hell out of you, boy.
Until you get it right.
Until you get it right.
Or you don't come back.
It's like, I got a problem. I got a mental problem. Whack. I don't care what you got.
I can't see. The numbers are down.
The numbers are backwards. Whack. And that's the way they dealt with it. Yeah. That's our tradition. Mm-hmm. So it's no wonder why when we have political elections and everything, we're actually doing pretty well today.
Well, and I mean, this is probably a stretch on my part, I guess, but
I doubt it.
You have students today that they're just like, I don't care. I don't care about school. I don't care about learning.
There really is.
We talked about in a podcast back about how having people come out of that acorn or coming out of the mold. Right. They're still there today.
Why did you go into education, Jameson? Why are you a teacher? We got a live one here.
Well, yeah. That's a tough question. Well,
that's pretty stupid.
One of the... no, I couldn't get a degree in anything else. No.
That's not true. Jameson's a great teacher.
I enjoyed, being around kids, learning, teaching kids.
But you're a male. You're the only male in your elementary school.
I am, yeah. I know. It's the
only one. And if something happens to you, man, it's all female.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, what do kids look up to? I mean, as a male stereotype,
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's a plus about being a male teacher
really is
that they handle me completely different than my colleagues, and me doing something compared to one of their female teacher doing something, is handled completely different in their perspective. So it's just different. They don't have a lot of male influences.
What it is. Many of them don't have fathers.
Yeah. So that then...
You're the father.
I'm the father. To a lot of them.
It's a heck of a responsibility.
The weight is bearing.
It is bearing. And people don't know that unless you've been there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But it's a beautiful thing. Elementary education, teaching. Mm-hmm. If you want to make change in people's lives and society. I mean, you know, be a doctor, you know, be a lawyer.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
lawyer.
Yeah.
How they doctors.
Telling me what's wrong with me.
Yeah. Well, I swear. You can tell we're from Kentucky. I'll beat your butt.
Yeah.
The teachers. Oh,
Yes.
my goodness. Oh, my goodness. We change the world, man. We make little changes in people that everyone else is beat up on.
Yeah.
And, you know, those little kids that don't have any hope. And I remember just telling some, when they'd try real hard on a test, you know, I'd give them an A, and they never had an A in their life.
No, yeah.
And they'd come up to me and they go, "What is this? You know, that's an A." You mean I actually did something good? I mean, I can't tell you how many times.
Oh.
And I said, I just really like the way you tried and approached something, you know, and we'll do better next time. And I mean, they just look at me with stars in their eyes, like, whoa, walking on water, man.
And this is getting deeper, I guess. But one of the hardest things with teaching would be, and I know leaving at the end of the day, I'm tired, I'm ready to go home. Or during the summer, it's nice to have a break.
Get out of here, you little red rat.
But at the end of the day, those thoughts in the back of your head of like, you know, I don't know what little Johnny's going home to. It's going to be rough. Those are the tougher
It's going to be real
days.
rough. I mean, how can they change their conditioning with just seeing a teacher who's got 25 or 30 kids in a room and dying for special attention and misbehaving to get that attention and nothing at home. I mean, even negative.
Oh, yeah.
We used to have, years ago in Kentucky schools, we used to have where we would go out and visit the homes before school started. They cut that out, I think, because they were afraid for teachers. And
rough,
you had to go on buddy system, and we'd run into places where the beer cans would be piled up on the porch, or the sanitation level would, you go in a house and it would just stink like sewage, or the kids would be mistreated. And, get back over in that corner before I slap you, or just no parents at home when we got there.
Yeah.
And they began to think that maybe the teachers' lives were in danger and the liability of it. They quit it. They stopped it.
It goes back to...
You have to have an armed guard.
Yeah, it goes back to the value of education. You know, 30, 40, 100 years ago, it wasn't that big. It wasn't that important. People were more wanting to...
And it's not important today for a lot of them. They don't see the... I remember growing up and being in a high school where people cut tobacco, and hearing in Kentucky that they would let school out when tobacco was ripe in certain areas, so that the guys in high school and the girls could go work the tobacco fields because their families depended on it. If they didn't let them out, they wouldn't come to school because their daddies needed them to do child labor.
Which goes back to Agrarian,
Kentucky.
Yeah.
Those are all signs of it. It's really fascinating. I mean, you know, you can, on one hand, we get real rough with Kentucky and criticize it and everything, and then the other, there's a certain beauty. You know, my father saw that. He saw the beauty of rural life and the simplicity of it and the salt of the earth people.
Yeah.
I'm bouncing around, but one thing I wanted to share, and I'm not sure where we fit this in, talking about Agrarian Kentucky and the differences. You know, I talked about Hardin County, you know, grew 410 pounds of tobacco. The same amount of acreage was planted in Hardin as was in Bourbon. Bourbon averaged almost 1,200 an acre, and the surpluses and so forth with that. But when we go back in the 1840s, again, back in history, where we have slaves, and the central Kentucky being the largest, and western Kentucky, concentration of slaves in the counties of Fayette, Jessamine, Bourbon, so forth. We talked about drunk Germans on the Ohio. We talked about the import of Germans and Irish along the Ohio River. They began to settle in places of northern Kentucky, particularly Covington, of course, across the river in Cincinnati, and Louisville. Well, we talked about the strength of politics controlling the state to a great extent in central Kentucky. The wealthy landowners had much say. They actually proposed during this time, along the Ohio River, there was much more interest in industrialism and commercialism as we approached the Civil War. They were fearful of their slaves and laws being enacted because that became an issue, obviously, the Civil War. So at one point, central Kentucky legislators proposed that people living, now listen to this, living along the Ohio River in those counties that were heavy in German and Irish, that their voting power in state legislature would be 38 to 1. It would take 38 of them to equal one vote in central Kentucky, and that was voted on in Kentucky legislature because they didn't want, those people were disinterested in agriculture, were disinterested in maintaining slavery, were more interested in using the river for commerce and industrialism. that they wanted that their vote in northern Kentucky, as far as a central Kentucky person was concerned, should take 38 of them to equal one vote.
Wow, I guess that didn't pass, though.
It didn't pass, but it was very popular.
Wow.
Certain regions. But it was that growing tension of slavery.
Yeah.
And abolitionism and protectionism.
The fear of
and the
losing
power
power
of money.
Yeah.
And that's true throughout the South if you study the Civil War. You know, most people that fought in the Civil War from the South didn't have slaves. They worked for people that were slaveholders.
Yeah.
And controlled the banks, the general store. It's kind of like coal mining.
Yeah.
They had the general store. And everybody worked for them. They were the power brokers.
Yeah.
They lived in plantation houses, had hundreds of slaves, and they wanted to protect their institutions.
Yeah.
So they got all these peons
to kind of
to fight for them.
Well, that brings up a comment I read somewhere a while back on the internet. I posted an episode.
Can I say one
Oh,
thing?
yeah,
And
go
then
ahead.
you got all these people today being Dr. Martin Luther King's Day. You know, it's interesting. You got all these people that are I guess we'll call them white supremacists, that denounce equal rights. There's still some people out there in certain places.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you know, wave their rebel flags.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, if they look at their ancestors and really knew history, if they were educated, they would see that they were being used by power brokers to fight the battle for the plantation. But now it's a racial thing. You know?
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting?
It is.
I hate Obama, you know.
Yeah.
People say that. I don't hate Obama. I love Obama.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see people of minorities be in offices of power today to give them a chance.
Yes.
Just like you and I oftentimes like to see children that are underscored in school have success.
Yeah.
Because it's good for society.
It is. Yeah.
It's good for humans. And if you love humanity, you don't try to destroy them all. You try to build them up and help them.
Positivity breeds positivity.
Absolutely.
Now, you're talking about these plantation owners or the bigger, I guess you want to start
Here we
social.
go into the Civil War. But it's all part of agrarian Kentucky and our history.
Well,
we see it today as you drive down the country roads to come to this library.
Now, I saw a comment that was made on one of our posts. And again, we're recording this on Martin Luther King's Day. It probably won't be posted for another few weeks. But
I know.
A person commented.
It won't matter because nothing will change in a few weeks.
That's true. A comment somebody had made, they pointed out a county and they said, back in the day, you know, I would think early 1800s, this family bought up or owned all the land. Well, then as more people came in, people ended up paying for that land and this and that. And as time went on, that family that originally bought up all the land remained in power, stayed empowered, still are in power today.
Well-educated.
You know, well-educated. Own most of the money, are the richest people in the county.
Own the banks.
And then everybody else in the county are poor. And that falls right into what we've been talking about.
What about the coal towns?
Well, we don't even need to get in the coal towns.
But I mean, it's the same principle.
It is, yes.
It's the same thing.
And those people,
over and over again.
Those people are probably the people in the coal towns probably richer than the people. I don't know. That might be a stretch to say.
in the poor
areas,
you have the people that are collecting all the money, and then you have all the people that are poor and starving.
Yeah, paying those people to
to
feed them and to take care of them and so forth. And those people are the ones making the decisions and so forth.
Social injustice.
It is. And, I mean, we can get into Eastern Kentucky, and, I mean, you get those
I knew when I said that to you. You're an Eastern Kentucky man. I love that.
You get those coal companies, man. We'll get to those podcasts a while down the road. But
you take the lead. You do. I like
I
to take the lead on that and make the comments.
Yeah. All right. That works for me.
Because I don't know much about it, and you know a lot about it. We're really pouring it on pretty heavy. But hey, I mean,
it is.
Do you want to just skirt things?
We could
and be
sit here and just say
about it.
We could talk in 1782.
Yeah, I know.
This
that's
law
right.
was passed.
That's right.
And
I can read
people
it.
came in.
And Thomas Clark says.
But if we're not driving conversation, then what's the point of it? Making you think. We're trying to make you think out there, listeners.
Society does seem to go with the flow. It does, and the flow is the current. People just get on a boat and they go down the river. They don't try to stop. Very few do. And those are the great ones that try to make social changes.
Yeah.
But everyone else just goes with, well, that's the way our program's going to be this year, folks, and, get on board. Yeah. You were talking about involvement in schools. Is there a lot of involvement today?
No, there's not.
There's not. Is there some involvement or none?
I mean, if you were to give me, if I was to guess a percentage, the percentage of kids, the amount of parents that are involved would be maybe 5-10%. And I'm probably shooting high.
Shooting high at 5%.
Yeah.
I used to say, when I started teaching in a rural school, that I've had parents come in for parent conferences, which I was glad to see. But what they would say, they would sit there and not say anything, but they'd just say, I'm going to tell you one thing. If little Billy Sue, if she gives you any trouble at all, you just pick up the phone and call me, and we'll take care of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to whip her butt. Yeah. And that was it. That was their. I want them to go to mine, to school to mine. They can be mindless.
Yeah.
They're just to follow the rules, by God. That's the important thing. Just to go along and follow the rules. Doesn't matter if they're dumb as a stick and they have no encouragement or ability, or no one even wants to bring out what ability they have. Yeah. But I'll whoop them good. Well, and some of those are the best students.
Very well behaved.
Yeah, very well behaved.
Well, and that brings up the point I mentioned
earlier. You ask them, say, do you read books with them or not? No. What books? Where do I get books?
Well, that brings up the point of loyalty. It's bred in you behave, and you don't run the family name down.
That's right.
And behave and be loyal and all.
As a teacher, I'm glad for that.
And everything will be good.
Everything will be good, man. You're cool.
Now, as far as reading or anything like that, we ain't gonna worry about that. You behave.
Or having family discussions at the table at night about politics or government or religion or why the crow flies across the field or why it doesn't,
Well, and that's so funny. Like my son, he's 5, and he asked me so many questions. And I mean, we talk about why is it raining? Why, those sorts of things. And the more we talk, and it can be a little frustrating sometimes as a parent, because he asked why is that? Great. And it just so much, but I wonder how many children, other kids are told, shut up. Yeah. I'm on my phone. I'm doing this. Yes. Go do whatever.
Go get on a
TV. They get their information from somewhere else.
That's right. That's right.
And really, if we're talking about education, schools, what's happening in school, and this contradicts everything we've said. What's happening in schools doesn't mean nothing. It's the parents and the kids.
That's right.
At home, getting it there, they don't.
It really is.
And then they send them to school to get it all there. And it's impossible.
Both of us taught writing, where we worked together. And, I used to give topics like, how do you feel about this? Or what do you think about this? Some, the more educated ones, could write and tell you an opinion about something. But the others were scared. And I learned that many of them, not just a lack of writing skills, but they were not trained to think about how they feel.
What do you think about this?
Yeah. No. I'm afraid. My daddy said I ain't supposed to tell you how I feel. I mean, it would almost come down to that. It's really sad. Yeah. And then you've experienced this. I can guarantee you. So you write about, what is your favorite lunch at school? That's where you start, and you teach them to write about. I like pizza. Yeah. Why do you like pizza? And I like corn.
For some reason, they
and I like chocolate milk. And that's it. Can we expand on that a little bit? What kind of pizza do you like? Do you like Pizza Hut, or do you like it at our school meal? Or
here is
do you like throwing it in your mama's face? Or tell me what you feel, man.
Here's what we need from any listeners out there.
Yes,
we want to know: is pizza and corn a staple in any other state besides Kentucky? Because I don't know who said, let's put pizza and corn together.
Did you see, talking about this, and I'm going to try real hard not to be political here, but just last week, the Department of Agriculture, U.S. Department of Agriculture under Trump's administration, Obama had all these health lunches and said too much food was being thrown away, that they said they're going to re-enter pizza and fries and corn for the standard school lunch and do away with all that vegetables and fruit that Michelle Obama wanted.
Pizza and corn. I don't know.
Load up on them carbohydrates.
I don't know. Well,
did you see that though?
No, I did not see that. But
it was on the news.
That is interesting.
They changed it, and the reason for that though, and I thought about it, giving credence to the other side here, is that they said too much school food was being thrown away when you gave them broccoli and vegetables and corn and stuff and salads. They were just throwing it in the trash, and they weren't eating their lunch. And they said the waste was huge.
Yeah. So now
again, schools trying to regulate, and sometimes that's the only meal they got. But I can get Coca-Cola and chips when I get home. I ain't eating this crap. And the obesity in Kentucky is worse than any state in the United States.
Yep.
And diabetes is the highest.
Yep. Give me some diabetes.
Yeah. But I mean, where do we go with this?
Yeah, how do we fix this?
Who do we yield to? How do we fix this?
It's a tough one.
We're full.
Now, and I know we're sidetracking big time, but
that's good.
Another point you brought up, and this goes back to loyalty.
This is Agrarian, Kentucky.
This goes back to loyalty. Oftentimes, if you're in education, you are very aware of this, but oftentimes you will have students, and this happened 2-3 years. You were still teaching at Crab Orchard.
They hadn't fired me yet.
Yeah. We had a student who, at home, things were not well.
Yeah.
Things were not well at all. Yeah. And
just one?
Yeah. This is more, but this incident was more vivid than others, I guess. But this student was having issues. It was showing at school. We knew it. And I approached this student multiple times. What's going on? You're acting different. And so on and so forth. And eventually it came out that what was happening at home was that Daddy was at home drunk and passed out. And the student was just there by themselves. The student, though, would not tell me or anybody else what was going on because they were loyal to Daddy, loyal to family, and did not want, and knew that if something came out that they would be taken from Daddy, and or multiple things could have happened, but they were so loyal that they did not want to express that.
I can tell you one that fits right along with this. It's even better. Okay, I'll up you one. Yeah. I had a student years ago that was being abused. Yeah, very visibly abused. Been beaten and came bruised, to school and everything. So I called the child welfare services that were required by law to report. And after a couple of weeks, I called them back and said, "Why have this is a ongoing, active situation? Why have you not investigated?" And they said, "Well, for your particular area of Kentucky, this is normal behavior. This is normal behavior. Yeah. There is nothing." We only investigate if it's something that's not normal. And they said, beating your kids, abusing them verbally, calling them, your daughters prostitutes or whatever, and beating them where they come in with physical, that's normal for your area. And so we will not investigate. And the law says that it's based on your culture in your area. So this was part of your culture to be abusive, and that's okay.
Wow. That's saddening. Well, with that sad note.
We hope we've uplifted you today. But it's interesting when we start talking about education. Naturally, Mr. Cable and I
are passionate.
And we also have experience in that area, and we can tell real-life stories and experiences, and it's ongoing. And, we want to see this be a better world, and we want to be part of it.
The biggest point we've pointed out many times on this podcast is being about history. Is the best thing about history is learning from it. So then you have the opportunity or the ability to change the future in some sort of way.
That's right. That's true. It's 16 degrees outside today. A little snow was coming down. I couldn't believe it. So I got my dog in the car and my shotgun out there too. They ain't taking my guns away.
So with that,
I want to say one more thing about that day at Mount Sterling with my dad. My dad wound up buying a beagle for $35, a rabbit dog. They call it a 15-inch dog. It goes from the shoulder to the ground. And he bought a Lefevre double-barrel 12-gauge shotgun for $100 that day. Yeah. The dog died after many years of wonderful experience. We had the dog for 10 or 12 years. And I still have my daddy's shotgun that I bought that day with John Sherman Cooper and the guns going off on the railroad tracks. It's a prize gun for my family. Yeah, I plan on handing it down to my children.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Tradition.
Well, that wraps up our podcast on Agrarian Kentucky on education. Will we have any more agrarian focuses, or do you think we're good with that? And we're moving on to, say, Henry Clay or some specific... Getting back to the timeline, the agrarian ones kind of just talked about
as we've seen, Mr. Cable... We don't really leave anything. Everything is a web that's connected to everything else, just like that puzzle. So we won't focus on it. It'll come back up again and again because it's who we are.
Yeah. So we hope you took notes.
Yeah. We're going to give you a test. Multiple choice and maybe open response.
Again, you can connect to us on Twitter at KYHistoryPod or on Facebook at KYHistoryPod. You can email us, thelandbetweenthemeadows@gmail.com. Or just message me, Mr. Pope, on Facebook. That's all for this time. We'll see you later.